Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here on my next Avatar in review video. This one's going to be episode 4 for the basically complete Avatar The Last Airbender series episode. I'm going to talk more generally about this as a complete series rather than the 3 individual books. So yeah, this is the complete series DVD box set, which as far as I'm aware was never released in America, but it was released over here. But obviously America did get the 3 individual actual box sets. But yeah, for some reason UK gets the complete series, but America didn't. Either way, that's that. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Just a quick update in terms of other videos. I was actually unable to get the Legend of Korra Book 3 Change art book today. Checked 2 comic book stores, neither of them had neither comic book store had it. So that review is going to have to wait because I'm going to have to order the book online and wait for it to actually be delivered here and released and stuff like that. So that video is probably going to be delayed until a few weeks, which probably more than likely means the Rift hardcover review I'll be able to do beforehand. Again, assuming my comic book store actually gets that book in when it comes out in like 2 weeks. But yeah, that's that. But yeah, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Quite simply, it is one of the best animated animated shows of all time. Like, there's really, I don't think, any way to disagree with that. It just is. And it's very important to a lot of people. Nearly every fan of Avatar says that this show is important to them, and not just because it's good and it's a really high quality show and stuff like that, but because it's meaningful to them. Like that's how powerful this show actually can be. People, you learn stuff from this show. This show has really good morals and teachings and stuff like that, just with the way the character arcs go and the kind of how just the show deals with its characters and the events going on and stuff like that. It's a really good show, I think, just for all ages in terms of like it's just a good show, action fun show for kids, and there's lots of extra meaning there for older fans. And so that's why I think that this show has continued to be popular. That's why Korra came out, because this show was important. Super well critically acclaimed, and obviously the fandom is obsessed with it. This show deserves all the credit it gets. Again, it's not perfect. And The Legend of Korra highlights some of the things that Avatar: The Last Airbender maybe doesn't do the best. And I'm going to talk about that in this video. But the idea here in this video is not necessarily to, again, talk about the 3 books again, but to talk about the series as a whole. So, my first talking point, I suppose, is primarily going to be, I suppose I'll just start off with my negatives on Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think for me, the weakest part of Avatar: The Last Airbender is just that book 1 ends up being a little bit inconsistent compared to the other 2 books. It really stands out compared to the other 2, which are super solid. Like, as I said before, book 2, lots of interesting story plot introduced, insanely consistent. Book 3, very character focused at the start, action packed towards the end. And book 1 is kind of just like, okay, there's not as much to a lot of the episodes in this book. None of the episodes are like downright bad, I don't think. But it's definitely the episode with the most number of episodes that you consider weaker. Again, they're important for where they're placed, but you really can see that this was a first season of a TV show. This was Mike and Brian's first ever time basically doing a TV show themselves that they made. And that really comes across here in that there's not a lot of plot. They do a good job at introducing it to the characters, but you can tell that they maybe had a few too many episodes for the amount of plot they wanted to include in the first book. So, book 1, it's one of those things where, like, Avatar: The Last Airbender, as I said, widely considered one of the best animated TV shows of all time, probably definitely gets into the conversation in terms of TV shows of all time, not live action and animation. But I don't think it gets that credit for book 1. I think it takes the plot from book 2. It takes the incredible action and character development in book 3 to really make it that show that it eventually becomes. Book 1 was just kind of like groundwork, solid start, you know. So that's a little problem I'd have with it. In terms of other problems, primarily just in terms of, you know, complete series arcs of characters, I think Toph's lack of resolution for her main character arc is a big flaw with the series. Um, you know, because it's a case of Toph introduced in the Blind Bandit. Her key character thing is her relationship to her parents. They don't treat her like she's capable at all. And the reason she leaves them and joins Team Avatar is because Team Avatar respects her for who she is and can see how powerful she is while her parents can't. That is her most important, most emotional piece of her character development. It's addressed, obviously, in book 2 with that episode, and her parents are mentioned in other episodes, like the fight with Katara in the chase. It's addressed in the Runaway then again in season 3. She even sends the letter via Hawkeye to her parents in attempts to make amends. But there's no resolution whatsoever in the series for it. And it is, just flat out, this is Toph's main character development arc in the series. Say what you will about her learning metal bending and stuff like that. Powers are cool and all, but her personal growth is really linked to the fact that she's proving this to her parents. And I thought, you know, Toph as a character, for me at least, I don't rate her as one of my top characters in the show. I know a lot of people do, but I can't because her character arc is incomplete. If there was a resolution for that relationship in the series, I probably would rate her a little bit higher because I like that Toph does have that more emotional side to her, as we see that in like episodes like The Runaway, as I said. And it's really cool when it comes out. We just didn't see it enough because this arc was put on the back burner in the series for some reason, and they never came back to it. And it is a problem with the series because, you know, I'll bring up the Zuko's mom thing in a minute, but at least they had an idea for that. They were going to do something with that at some point in the future. The Rift comic series, which is what actually resolves Toph's issue with her parents, only ended a couple of months ago. And there was definitely not a plan to... We don't know the full, like, complete giant scale plans for the Avatar universe from Mike and Brian. We just don't, but I really don't think that there was a plan when the show came to an end back in 2008 that, oh yeah, in a few years we're going to do a comic series that resolves this. It's just a wide open plot point in the series, and it's important to one of your main characters. And without it, I feel she's a little bit lacking as a character. And that's what keeps me from thinking of Toph as one of my favourite characters. So there's that. Now, the other thing is the Zuko's mom thing. I'm surprised that a lot of people don't actually bring this up as more of a negative with the series, but it is a kind of a case of, like, again, it's an important thing to Zuko. I don't have as big of a problem with this one as I do with the Toph thing, because the nature of that story means that you have to spend a decent amount of time with it, and because this story of Avatar: The Last Airbender is about the end of the war, there was no real way to explore Zuko finding Ursa in the series so much. So it's a little bit of a weird situation that they were in with that reveal, and that they either had to do a couple of minute resolution at the end of the series, which maybe wouldn't have been as satisfying, or just have it be this big cliffhanger that they put in the final episode. And that's what happens. You know, basically second last scene of the series is, "Where's my mother?" And it's cool because you think, oh cool, Avatar's going to continue, they're probably going to do another series, and we're going to see what happens. That didn't happen. So it ends up being this super important thing to Zuko and his character arc, finding his mother, and it just doesn't get the focus it needs. Obviously, it is later revealed in the Search comic, which was basically finished about a year ago. And the difference with this one is that we've heard rumors that there were plans initially to have some sort of a resolution for Zuko's mother in the finale. but they took it out because they didn't want to kind of, I suppose, waste a potentially good story just in like a couple of minutes resolution. They then planned, I think, for a TV movie on Nickelodeon before they pitched The Legend of Korra, and Nickelodeon didn't like that. I think because of the nature of the search story and how it works out, Nickelodeon didn't really want that on their channel. And so it eventually had to become a comic. So there's a little bit of a story behind the whole Zuko's mom thing, but it is a negative with the series, I think, just that it's this thing just left open and the series itself didn't attempt to resolve it itself. It was just a kind of like, hey, big cliffhanger that the series doesn't really resolve. Because when you're talking about this series, I think just the series on its own, you have to just talk about the content of the episodes. You can't bring in the comics that came out much later on. Yeah, so there are two problems I have in terms of the overall kind of plots, arcs and stuff like that. That's cool. Other than that, any negatives I have, I think, in terms of characters and plot are just kind of like, I kind of wish it's kind of like I wish it had a few more episodes. I almost wish it was a little bit more anime-like, almost, that it could do stuff with some of the other more minor characters and give us their backstory. So, Iroh, for example, we get so many little hints as to his past and what he's been through in so many years, like the siege of Ba Sing Se that he was the commander at, the death of his son, and he then went to he observed waterbenders and developed the lightning redirection technique. He at some point went to the ancient Sun Warriors and was chosen as worthy by the dragons. He went to the spirit world one time. All of these little mysteries, and we don't really know that much about Iroh's history before we actually meet him in Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think there was definitely potential for some sort of a arc explanation there or something like that. I would have liked maybe if the show had more episodes. I don't really think it's a big problem with the series. It's just I kind of wished some of those minor characters had got more attention. Like even Mei and Ty Lee, their main arcs come in like the beach, and then Mei has her relationship with Zuko, but mainly it's just the beach and also the betrayal at the Boiling Rock from the two of them to Azula, and that's kind of their arcs done in the series. And it's just stuff like that. Suki, I wish had a bit more of a character arc. I like Suki as a character, but you really have to kind of really analyze her character to find her arc. It's not like fully there because she was kind of the latest addition to kind of Team Avatar in a way. So there's stuff like that. Some of the more minor characters, they're interesting enough that I want to know more about them. I just wish the show had kind of done more with them. And maybe that's another that kind of creates a problem with the book one, going back to book one, in that yes, book one introduces a lot of these minor characters, but imagine book one was really tightly written, lots of plot, and they maybe like introduced characters earlier on, and that meant more episodes for the team as a whole to be together and more episodes to have developing other characters. Like imagine Suki at the end of the Kyoshi Warriors actually decided to join the team instead of going away. The amount of extra character development you would have had with Suki because of that, but again, not really too big of a problem. So there's some of my issues with the series. I'll bring up some of the other ones maybe as I go on. So getting into some of the positives about the series, it does characters so well. I complained a little bit just there about some of the minor characters, but in terms of the main characters, the arcs are really well done. You have the likes of Aang and Zuko, who are basically our main characters, and they have these really strong, powerful arcs. Aang, the reluctant avatar, who is tasked with basically the hardest task any avatar's ever been tasked with, pretty much. That being, as a 12-year-old, to have to end the world, to be placed in such a situation where he, as a character, his nature is that he doesn't want to be like a responsible character. He just wants to play. He's a very playful character. So to have him basically have the world depend on him to end a war, it's a huge arc in the amount of kind of leadership role he has to step up into and how much he has to change because of that. And then they add extra complexities to his character with giving him the flaw of being the airbender, the avatar who's too attached to the people he cares about. Um, and then the fact that he is an airbender also means that he doesn't want to like kill anyone, so he's almost at a little bit of a disadvantage in most fights because he never wants to hurt anyone really. So he's always on the defensive. So it's a really interesting just idea for the character, in that like the pacifist has to save the world kind of thing. He has to fight in a war, and just as the story goes on, Aang is just really great arc, and then same with Zuko, who has the most complex arc of the series with his constant dealing with, has he made the right decision about, is he on the right side or not, what is his true destiny, should he go ahead with his father's what his father's telling him to do and try and be the son his father always wanted, or should he listen more to his uncle and try and just come up with his own destiny himself, and you know just do what he wants sort of thing. And how it just comes so well together with the introduction of like Azula, and you have the influences on his life, his sister for bad, his uncle for good, and how he makes these bad decisions but then ultimately makes the right decision. He's such an interesting and complex character, and I definitely see why he's one of the more popular characters in the series. And then Sokka and Katara are kind of the other main characters, and they obviously don't have the as grand of character arcs as the other ones, but they're still very solid. Just seeing that Katara is very consistent in her character. She's always that one who is there as just this kind of beacon of hope for the world. She believes so heavily in the Avatar, in Aang, and her arc is about becoming strong herself. So she doesn't just have to depend on the Avatar coming back. She can also help change the world with her own powers. And Sokka with kind of becoming the warrior like his father and almost surpassing his father in some ways, becoming a better warrior, better leader, and stuff like that. They're really just solid arcs that don't try and do too much, because some shows are obviously kind of in a danger of doing that, where you give every character a super complicated character arc. But Avatar, I felt, really knew what to do with its characters. Like, you have your two main characters have the more complicated arcs, and then give other characters kind of more as just solid, simple, to the point arcs. And then, yeah, on one hand, going to the main plot of the series, I think it is overall a positive that it is quite simple. It means you're not trying to keep track of too much. It's just our heroes, this group, is going to travel the world. Aang has to learn the four elements, and then he has to fight the Fire Lord before the comet comes and try and end the war. It's simple, but the complexities that come into play are so interesting. And again, it comes back to how important Book 2 Earth is in the grand scheme of the series. Without the Bossing Say arc, the whole Avatar State arc, the series doesn't really have a lot of plot. So Book 2 is very important. I think the start of Book 3 is very important, with our characters learning that the Fire Nation as a whole is not the enemy, it's just the kind of Ozai government kind of thing. So there's some very interesting stuff that later comes into it. Book 1 just ends up being a little bit lacking, but it's a nice introduction to the series, as I said. So yeah, that huge positive just in the series overall. And again, coming back to, as I said at the start, what you learn from this show. It's so... it's not... Apart from maybe some of the earlier episodes, like 1 and 2, the episode is not fully written for kids. Like, they're very kind of mature in some of the things they explore, like some of the themes they explore, the way the characters deal with things. The show doesn't dumb itself down because it's on Nickelodeon and stuff like that. So straight away, the opening intro of the first episode deals with genocide, war. Our main characters have lost their mother Sokka and Katara have lost their mother because of the war. Aang doesn't have any parents because of the culture he's raised in, and how the show deals with the various cultures of the nation is actually very interesting and well done. the kind of ideals that each of these cultures have, and just even the kind of some of the spiritual elements of the show are really well done. Overall, it's just it, I don't have words to describe some of the things about this show, but episodes like the Guru, I think, is such a meaningful episode. You know, some people might complain that, oh, why do you have such a more kind of emotional episode rather than dramatic episode towards the end of the season, but that episode is just amazing in terms of the amount of insight you get into like Aang's character and how you deal with their characters at that point in time. The show just has this kind of emotional connection, and nearly everyone who watches it gets that connection. And I think that's one of the biggest positives about the show as well, just that there's very few times you see someone say, I recommended this show to someone, they watched a few episodes but couldn't get into it, so they just quit watching it. Like, that's something I've never seen with Avatar. I've seen either people just say they just wouldn't give it a chance, or they gave it a chance and they loved it. So that tells a lot just in terms of how much the show grabs people and stuff like that. So that's a huge positive. Coming back to another negative, I think overall the villains are not the best in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Azula excluded. Now let me explain this. I'll explain this more in the Legend of Korra overall video, which I think is going to be number 9 of this series. But you know, you look at our main villains. Book 1, our main villain is Zhao. Book 2, our main villain is Azula, with Long Feng kind of in the side. And in book 3, our main villain is Ozai, with Azula also involved in that book. So Zhao and Ozai are very similar characters in terms of the role they play in the series. They are there to show the bad side of the Fire Nation. People like these two are the enemy, not the citizens of the Fire Nation or these other people. It is people like this who are there for power and to improve their ranking in the Fire Nation government and military, like Zhao. And then Ozai is the current Fire Lord. He's continuing the war. He's going to use the comet to completely win the war for the Fire Nation. They're just bad guys, and there's not many complexities to them. Like, you had potential with Zhao to give him more complexities with having Zhang Zhang be his teacher, but they just kind of explained it away. We're like, oh, he eventually became evil and started using Fire Nation for bad. Sorry, like there was no real moment where like they gave an explanation, a kind of like, I understand why Zhao is like this. No, it was just Zhang Zhang taught him, he became evil. Like there's nothing complex about Zhao whatsoever. And yeah, like they could have done stuff with Zhao, as I said, like give him this complicated reason or something like that, where he was never the best firebender and he could never live up to his master or something like that. So eventually the only way to become more powerful was for him to actually just become this person and like gain power that way. Because we sort of see that, like, Zuko, we learn, is not the most powerful firebender or the most adept at learning firebending, but he could still beat Zhao even with very little training at the start of the series. So Zhao is established to not be the best firebender, but they don't really give him that much. So he is threatening just because he has power and he's an admiral, commander, over the course of the whole series, but he's not the most threatening character. He works completely for the role he has in the series, and that's to be the actual villain in Book 1 and show that Zuko is not the villain in the series. That's his role, but he's not the most threatening villain, and maybe that's a problem with Book 1 overall, in that you don't really care about the villain massively. I think Zhao's a cool character, I do like him, and he has a really cool way in which he's killed, quote unquote, but in reality his soul is trapped in the spirit world, that type of thing. Spirit is trapped in the spirit world. So yeah, there's that. And then with Ozai, there's a slight problem, I suppose, in that with the whole Fire Lord thing, the reason that the wars have been going on 100 years, you basically set it up that the three past Fire Lords are basically the same character. That Sozin started the war, Ozai is going to end it, Azulon was there in the middle. They're all fundamentally the same character in that they don't really do anything to differentiate between them. There's a little hint here and there that there's some different stuff with Ozai, like the fact that he is the second to the throne. He, because Iroh's older than him and they're brothers. Iroh was meant to be the Fire Lord, but because of what happened to Liu Ten, he didn't take up the role when Azulon was killed. So Ozai took the throne, and that's all explained in like the search and stuff like that. But yeah, they don't explore that. Like I think there's potential with Ozai to give some sort of meaning to that, whereby maybe the reason he's so where he focuses more on Azula than Zuko is that he has this issue perhaps with the fact that he was skipped over until he like forced his way onto the throne because he was the second born, and so by default he put preference on his own second born regardless of their power levels. That would be something to add to Ozai's character. But as he is, he's just the bad guy in shadow, the Fire Lord for most of the series, and that's fine to keep him threatening, and you don't see him too much, and so the end fight ends up being amazing. But when he's defeated, it's just, okay, the bad guy's defeated. There's nothing complicated about him. But there's hints that there's something there, like the fact that Azula's so manipulative, obviously because she learned from Ozai. So Ozai, to some extent, is manipulative. And you get that. Ozai is a much more interesting character in the the Promise comic series. And I'm very interested to see more on him. He's a super interesting character. The problem is we don't really get to see a lot of that in the series itself. You have a few scenes here and there with Zuko talking to Ozai, and they're good, but they're more good because it's Zuko standing up to this person who has forced this destiny on him, this person who effectively made Zuko the character he is at the start of book one, so obsessed with this mission that's not really helping him and stuff like that. So Ozai there's not much there to him really, so the series could have done a better job at covering that, I suppose. So yeah. Then we get to Azula. Azula is more like, I suppose, an interesting villain should be, in that, she is the sister of one of our characters we're very interested in. She's Zuko's sister. She ends up being the villain who's most prevalent throughout the series in terms of actively fighting our heroes. And she's intelligent, manipulative, and there's a reason for why she is like that. There's an explanation given to why she's evil. They make her vulnerable at times and make you feel something for her, so she's not just a full-on villain. And they do that with Azula by basically saying that she was raised completely by Ozai. She didn't learn how to properly be a kid going into being a teenager, and so she doesn't really have great social skills with people outside of being a military commander, being someone who controls others through fear. She doesn't know how to keep people around her just normally. She has to control them through fear or manipulate them, and that's all she knows. And if that fails, she isn't kind of tough enough to kind of really accept that. And we see that when her friends betray her, when stuff starts to not go right for her, she can't handle it and breaks down, because she hasn't had really other situations where she's been forced to do that. Like, Zuko is incredibly tough as a character because he's been through so much and can withstand that. Azula, on the other hand, can't. And it ends up being this great situation between Azula and Zuko, in that they effectively swap places by the end of the series, in that you have Zuko is now the more powerful firebender, he's a stronger person, and Azula, at the end of Avatar Last Airbender, is in a situation where she has to almost go on some sort of a journey like Zuko and realize what her true path is and stuff like that. And we're going to see that, I assume. She left at the end of the search. We're going to see that, I assume. So that's interesting. Again, that's a potential problem with the series as well. Azula was our main villain in terms of her character. and we never got a conclusion to that arc. We end with just Azula's crazy. And she's one of those characters who we saw that a little bit of vulnerability with. And you do feel sorry for her at the end when, she's this really powerful character. She can generate lightning. She's got blue firebending, the only character in the series to have blue firebending. And she's crying at the end of the series. That's how she's taken down by Katara and Zuko, and she's crying. She's just a mess, basically, at the end. And you feel sorry for her, but they don't do anything with her after that. She's just in an insane asylum after the series. And she's covered in the search, and she's interested in the search. Why didn't they give a hint as to what was going on with her in the series itself? This is your most interesting villain. You've gave her an actual character arc. Give us more. So villains, maybe not Avatar's strongest suit, but there's potential there. They do cover the villains more in the comics and stuff like that. So there's that. Obviously this is a series comparing Avatar to Korra effectively, but we'll do that more in the last series. So there's not really anything I can say like specific, like the bending in Avatar is so great because Korra has bending and stuff like that. So there are kind of points I can't really bring up with regards to this stuff. But overall, just the format of Avatar works well in that it is 61 episodes telling one overall story. There's some side plots here and there, but it's one story overall. And that is Aang trying to end the war and becoming the Avatar we all want him to be. And fundamentally, the show ends well. For what the series wanted to accomplish, it ends well. There are some issues with some of the minor characters, some of the main characters not having their arc completed, but fundamentally, this show ends well. And a lot of people were worried that it wouldn't, but they managed to do it in the end. They did the series in such a way where they ended it, and apart from a few little issues, people were happy with how the show ended, and that's not often the case with shows. And so Avatar: The Last Airbender is successful in that sense, and it's just one of those shows where you look at the characters in episode 1, you look at the characters in episode 61, and you just see the journey. You see how far these characters have come. You care that they've developed to this point, and you felt that journey with them the whole way. You connect to the characters, and if any show can do that, that is a huge strength. And Avatar, far and away, is one of those. And so that's why this, for me, is in my top 2 TV shows of all time. It's this and Korra. Again, I haven't decided on which I prefer more. We'll see how the series goes from here on out with regards to that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say here. This is a great series, and any of the negatives I had really are minor in the grand scheme of how good this series actually is. There's no massive problem with this series. There's no, Avatar's not an anime, but it almost comes across like that. Most anime sites put up links to Avatar and Korra, so it's almost treated like an anime in that sense. And the fact that it doesn't really have any filler arcs or anything like that is good. It's just a super solid 61 episode story, let down a little bit by the first season not being maybe as strong as the other two, and you kind of look back on it with, imagine Mike and Brian had some experience having almost run a show themselves completely elsewhere, and they came onto Avatar Book 1 with huge experience. Like, how different would Book 1 actually be? But overall, great series, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Just, it's something I'll always remember, just in terms of the show that in many ways defined my childhood, and really, I suppose, helped me to become the person I am today. It sounds really weird to say that, but that's how big of an impact this show had on me. It's important to me. The reason I covered this show primarily on YouTube, and I did Korra, was because this show is important to me. It means a lot to me. I get emotional when I watch scenes in this show, and that's incredible that this show can do that. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on Avatar as a whole. You know, really just think about this series as a whole, and don't just go, I like it, I don't like it. Really think about what you like about the show, and think about what's wrong with the show. Do you agree with some of the criticisms that are brought up, or some of the positives that are brought up? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with episode 5, which is going to be about Legend of Korra Book 1 Air. So we're starting Korra next week. But yeah, that's been episode 4. Thanks for watching, and bye.